Welcome to Makeover Monday Viz review for this week. I'm losing track of how many weeks we're in. I think we must be at about week 12. Let me actually have a quick look. Maybe week 11. Let's see. We are week 11. So if you are here, I'd love to hear a quick hello. Let me know where you're tuning in from and if you've already done your Makeover Monday Viz or not. It is Wednesday evening, so the usual time. I'm managing to do that this week. And for those who are new, who haven't seen this before, welcome. The session is about 30 minutes, and I will give feedback to on as many visits as I can. Let me share my screen so that you can see what I'm talking about. You are probably familiar with the Makeover Monday website where you find the week's data. So this week we're talking about women's college basketball rosters. And let's look at the original visualization. Andy always puts the data source in there and where you can find the data. So we've got some bar charts going on, and there's a table and something else. Okay, this is men's basketball. So I don't think this is the right link. Anywho, I'm sure you have figured it out. Let's see what people have created. I believe that Andy has not done his Watch Me Viz yet. I don't know if he's doing that this week because he's in Australia. So he's got a very full schedule visiting the data school there and, working with the local folks. Let's have a look. Okay, so you should be able to see my screen. Yes, you can. The first one is not actually a Makeover Monday Viz, so I'm not sure what that's all about. There are some... here. There is one by Yusuki. And this time I'm going to try and mix it up because I do get complaints from people that their Viz isn't being reviewed. And while I cannot possibly do all of them in 30 minutes, I will try and, mix things up a bit, especially if there are people who I give feedback to every week, then maybe sometimes I just have to skip them. So this one is created by Yusuki Nakanishi, NCAA Women's College Basketball Players Height, 2016 to 2017. So here you can select a different unit. So I'm going to select meters because I don't do things in feet. I'm through and through a metric system kind of person. I find that very logical, easy to relate to. It's what I grew up with. So let's see. Okay. I was going to say 433 meters. That doesn't sound quite right. No, this is... So we have the distribution here, how many players fall into the different categories of height. So at the bottom, you see the height in meters. And I'm a bit confused. So, okay, so it restarts for every position, of course. That would be my first feedback is there's a lot of numbers and they seem a bit... Well, I guess they're not arbitrary. They're, used, they're based on the histogram, but the units seem to be changing. So we've got between 2 and 3 centimeters for each of the buckets, which is, I don't mind so much, but because there's such a row of numbers and they are rotated, so I can't easily read them, it gets a little bit confusing and a little bit blurry. And given that this is about the player's heights, I want to see the height a bit more obviously. Right now, what I see is... Oh, thank you, Tableau. Right now, what I see is very obviously how many players are of a certain height. But I don't see the height easily until I hover. Actually, then I still don't see it. We're back to the old unit. So let's go back to meters. So I can hover. But here, for example, it would be great if the bucket, so the height bucket, which is about 1.68 meters, if that was actually specified so that I don't have to then rotate my head and read the very small font. That is something I would recommend. Let me see. And that's already zoomed in. So if I go to 100%, it's hard to read. So always remember when you call something out in the title, whether that is having a question that people can answer with the Viz or highlighting a certain feature like the player's height, make sure that actually is obvious in the Viz, because otherwise people will quite quickly get disinterested because it feels like too much work to actually figure out what the information is, what the answer to the question is. So we've got guards, forward, guard/forward, center, forward, center, and wing. Now, I don't know much about basketball. I should know more, but I just don't. It's not a sport I follow, and I don't know the different positions. But my assumption is that guards are their job is to defend, right? So they should be taller to defend, the team, the other team from scoring, or prevent them from scoring. So I'm assuming they would be taller, but also we have more of them. Then, like, is that how I'm reading this? Because we just have more players in this position than any of the other positions. Yes, that would be players tend to get taller as they move up the division. No, players don't get taller. I mean, they get taller if they're still growing, but it's not that if I'm the person moving up the division, I suddenly grow. And that is literally how I would understand this sentence. So I would rephrase this sentence, because it's not that the individual players grow because they're moving up a division. It's that player heights tend to get or tend to be taller in higher divisions. So I suppose the conclusion from that is that I'm drawing from that is to make it to a higher division, it's an advantage if you're taller to begin with. But at college level, I imagine all of these women have already finished growing. That would be my assumption, or pretty close to finishing growing. So they don't just suddenly grow more because they have moved up in the ranks. So that needs some rewording. Okay, let's move on to the next one. What do we have here? Danielle Bikoy. Okay, I haven't seen that name before. So let's give Danielle a quick review. NCAA Women's Guidelines and Statistics. How tall are the women basketball players on each NCAA team? Okay, so what I really like is the average height for the different positions is immediately called out after the question. So without looking any further into the viz, I have an answer, right? And then I can explore further. So I think that's really good. And there's some call outs, there's some information that people outside of basketball probably wouldn't really know or wouldn't really think about. So I like that. So, I get the option to compare teams by height, position, team state, etc. So there's 938 teams. That's a lot of teams. 13,000 players. The average height is 5'9". Holy moly! That seems really high. I mean, I probably, I don't know. I haven't checked the data, but that's really tall. I guess it is basketball after all, but still, that just seems like very tall. So you can filter by position. What I would be interested in here is what's the sort order of the position and why are there different colors? Is the color based on the height? In which case, why not just make if you want to use the icons, you could just make them larger for the height. Or is the color based on the number of players in that category, in that position category? I'm not a huge fan of the icon. Like, you could actually use the one you have at the top, which is a woman. I don't know if she's playing basketball. It looks like shorts. Yeah, that's a basketball at the top. Because in netball, which I don't think is popular in the US, but in netball, women wear skirts. But I think that the very traditional woman in a dress or a Superman cape or Superwoman cape is a bit outdated, and it just doesn't quite fit here when you have a different icon earlier. So you could change that. But yeah, I would love to understand in what order or why you've chosen the order for the different positions. From what I can tell, is no position comes first and then it's alphabetical. It's fine. Yeah, but maybe you could rank them by height and actually, adjust the heights, etc. So filter by state. Here, what I would recommend is, yes, Americans will probably quite happily relate to the 2-letter acronyms. Everyone outside the US will not. I know PA, I know CA. The other ones, I can guess them, but I don't really want to. I would like to see the actual full name of the state instead, because to me that's not very meaningful. But also, are these the number of players or are these the number of teams? Um, I I can guess it's players given the numbers, but that like what does it what purpose does it serve if I can filter by state? Like, are there shorter or taller people in different states, or does the same assumption still hold true? I see that so if I go, where was it? I had something just before. So suddenly so it looks like for some states players are categorized into no position, and for other states that category doesn't exist. And then suddenly here in Wisconsin, we lose the wing. Do they not have people play on the wing? I don't know. But that is something I would question, and that might not actually be very helpful, or if you don't want people to ask those questions, or if it's just incomplete data and you can't really tell a story with it, you could just actually keep that filter out. Like, does it help people filtering by state? I don't know. And then the distribution by height is a bit difficult because I can't read most of it. So there's 5'2", 4'1", ... I don't know if that's 4 foot. Surely that's not 4'1", but I don't know. So with this histogram, one suggestion would be to make the histogram a bit smaller. It doesn't need to be so tall, so make it half as high, but draw some conclusions to tell me, okay, most players are between, so let's say 5'6" and 6 foot tall. And what does that mean? Maybe even how does it compare to other sports or to men, or whatever it might be, or how does it compare across division, which I think, because you can filter here, so you could even show that by having multiple histograms categorized by division, so that what we saw in the previous is the claim that as you go up in division, you will find taller players. Well, can we support that statement with the histogram? That would be really interesting to look at. Okay. Okay, here we have a map view. Overview of basketball players in the US. Okay, so that's a slightly different topic because it looks like it doesn't filter or focus just on women. I don't know what these numbers are. Height. Oh, in inches. Do people do that? Do they do height? Like, would I say, oh, I don't know, 64 inches tall? That's a lot of math to my head. So yeah, I mean, I don't know how tall I am in inches, quite frankly. I know, foot and inches just about, but really, I would, like, if that's common, fine. If it is more common to use foot and inch, then I would choose that. So I'm not a huge fan of the colors, mainly because we have red and green together, and we shouldn't, because that's hard to distinguish for people who have, color blindness. Also, at the bottom we have gray. There's a lot of gray, and I think what I like here is there seems to be a lot of guards, like maybe just simply a lot of people in that position, but also I can see that the guards are kind of across heights, but the forwards, are they all that tall? Actually, 70 inch centimeters, 177. Okay, that's not hugely tall, but are the forwards all more on that side? And I thought from a previous viz that the guards were the taller ones, and that maybe I'm remembering wrong. And then I don't even see where the people are who play on the wing. But I like the idea that I can see how the height varies for the different positions. I just think it could be a bit more neatly executed, and maybe you don't even need to have all the positions stacked together. Maybe you could get people to filter, and rather than having them all stacked, you could have the whole this filter for that. Education level of players. Well, kind of, but it's not like these are professional players who, let's say, are only juniors. Like that's their level of education. It just happens to be that at the time the data set was taken, they were at the junior level. It's not like that is the end of their education. So I don't think no, you can't say that education level of players. It happens to be the level they're playing at the time the data set was taken. Number of players by state. Okay, is that important? I mean, it's just going to be that the states with a lot of players, sorry, with a higher population and more universities have more players. That's just, I mean, this is mainly going to be a population distribution. Also, is this about women at NCAA level, or is this all basketball players in the US, which I'm sure it's not, given the numbers that we're getting? There's more than 33 basketball players in Montana, surely. So be more specific in what this data is about, so that you don't get questioned for things like that by me or other people. Okay. Okay, so Jacob has just completed his first Tableau dashboard. Basketball is not my thing, but it was interesting to find out that the best teams engage the highest players. They're not the highest, they're the tallest. But I understand English might not be your first language, but I just want to call that out because high, being high could be misunderstood here. So you would describe them as the tallest players. Okay, select the stats for the players. So this is women's basketball, so it spells out what the league is, what the season is, that it's women's basketball. Bar chart to the right, map below, fun fact. So why not move that text over to where that bar chart is, to where that histogram is, so that you don't have to say it's for the bar chart on the right. Like it could just be a subtitle. So height distribution by division. Division 1, Division 2. Oh, no, Division 1, Division 2, Division 3. So we see a little bit of a shift, that more players are, well, I guess the shorter players are in the lower division, whereas the highest division has more of the taller players. I would spell out what the divisions mean, like that 1 is the highest, 3 is the lowest at this level. At least it's what I believe is happening. The map below is the country of origin for. Okay, so how is that, or how is that relevant for the height of players? So there's some selected stats, which is fine. So you're looking at height, but then you're also looking at country of origin. I don't know if that's really, I mean, sure, you could say it's related, and I'm sure there's some correlation, but at the same time, I'm like, okay, how does that, how is it connected? And why are some countries blue and some countries light blue? I guess it's the number of players that determines the intensity of the blue. But why are certain countries called out and others are not? So it says country of origin for players born outside of the US. Okay. And then there's a fun fact, only 8% of players come from abroad. But the top 3 highest players, tallest players, not highest, are foreigners. Okay. So I think there's more of a story in here than I can see from the data and the viz. So I think it's got a lot of potential to have a proper story, but I think it doesn't hang together at the moment. So move the text closer to the actual charts they relate to, but also try and find a story that hangs together. And maybe the story isn't about the height. Maybe it is about the country of origin. And, if they're from outside the US, where are they from? And what, if you said the three tallest players, okay, I mean, that could just be fluke, right? It could just be a really tall woman from Spain who happens to love basketball, be amazing at it, and play in the US in college. But yeah, the connection between things isn't clear, so that I'm having to make a lot of assumptions, and I don't like making assumptions when I deal with data. I want to have as much proof as possible for the things that I'm drawing conclusions on. Okay. But it's great to have you participate, so I don't wanna, discount that. So let's have a look at Elena's viz. No no comments in the chat. Okay, so I will just continue. Is height critical for playing it should be women's basketball, in the US NCAA. The most common height for women basketball players is between 5'7" and 5'10", while the average US female height is that. It seems that basketball is a game only for tall people. That's my assumption as well, or my impression, and I'm definitely a layperson when it comes to basketball. It does seem like, typically people who play and who play well are taller because, they have the baskets that they have to reach, or at least get close to, so it definitely is an advantage, and it's probably more important to be tall in basketball than it is in golf, for example. So let's switch to centimeters again, just for me, for one. I really like the call out of the average female height as being, 163, so that people have a reference point of just how many women who are taller are in those other categories. Now, I think what we also need to keep in mind here, though, is it looks well, when we think about height and we see a histogram, it's very quick or very easy, tempting to think, oh, this is how much taller the next bucket of women is. But it's not. The height is actually at the bottom. So in this case, it's a matter of like 4 centimeters, which is less than 2 inches. Because from here you would think, oh, it's about a third taller, which of course is not the case. Now, that is not a criticism or something to correct. It's just something to keep in mind that when we talk about the size of things, and especially the height of people or the height of buildings or something similar, and we have a vertical bar chart or a histogram, that can just be a conclusion that our brain jumps to that we then have to correct. So especially because the average height is being called out and it's pointing at a bar, it should really point at the bottom, or saying, so if I look at this bar, so we've got 447, so count of names should be number of players instead. Height, clean double, medium, height, title. Yeah, those labels need to be tidied up, but what could be a better label is, at NCAA level, there are 447 players who are at the same height as the average female in the US, which is 1.63, or if we go back to inches, I think it was 5'4". Because this is really the 447 rather than the 5'4". So I hope that's understood what I'm trying to get at here. So when we look at the height distribution across primary positions, so that's center, forward, guard, and wing, and divisions 1, 2, 3, it seems that even if you're not stereotypically basketball height, or maybe the kind of the ideal height or something, there are higher chances to play the game on the position of guard in Division 3. Okay. So how do I know that? How do I support this claim with those charts? I don't quite see the connection. So what you're saying, I think, is that the distribution of heights in the position of guards is that there's more chances to play at that level for women who aren't quite as tall, as evidenced by quite a number of women below the average basketball height or ideal basketball height playing in that position and playing at level 3. That's quite a bit to wrap my head around, and I think it's not clear from these charts to make that inference. maybe you can clarify that a bit, or maybe point to the data points that you want to use to support that. Okay. Maybe that's why I'm sometimes struggling with these viz reviews, because there's a lot of thinking involved in my evening after a day of work. Okay, we've done a lot of bar charts. Let's see if there's any other types. Okay. Oh, that's Andy's viz. Okay, so let's look at Parker's. And I'm just gonna open this image. Okay, cool. Great to see that you are on the live stream, Jacob, and I hope it was helpful. So player height increases significantly at the higher levels of women's college basketball. Yes, I think that's a fair description. So it's not like the player is growing, but the player height increases, which is something we discussed earlier. So this is in inches again. So this might be a fair way to express height in the US. I'm assuming. I struggle with that because inches to me always is 2.5 centimeters. So to do 70 times 2.5 boggles my mind. I like the division 1, 2, 3. So showing the top division at the top. I think it makes it a bit more self-explanatory. And I love how you see the distribution of the heights across the division. So you see that shift. It's not huge, but it is probably significant if I had to guess. And I like the reference line of 6 foot, because 6 foot for most people, I think, is something they have in mind where they're like, yeah, I know 6 foot. I mean, for me, it's like, yeah, I know 6 foot because it's 180. And that's a reference point that a lot of people have. I think even if you don't follow basketball, a lot of people are like, oh yeah, you've got to be about 6 foot, that kind of stuff. So that's a really useful reference line to include. And percentage of players 6 foot or taller, I really like that too. The one thing I'm missing here is, so I like the reference line at 6 foot because it's meaningful for me, but is it a meaningful reference point in basketball? That's what I don't know. So why have you chosen 6 foot or taller as your yardstick? Excuse the pun. Why that one? Is that maybe the average height at the men's game or something? I don't know. Hence my question. But that is one thing you could clarify. I really like the viz. I like the design. It's nice and simple. It's got all the information I need, and I like that it's in percentages rather than the numbers, because it just makes me think. Well, when I see a percentage, I'm not thinking so much about the actual number, which I could then confuse with heights and all those things. So I think this is really well done, and I really like to see the different kind of distributions. Yeah, well done, Parker. I like it a lot. Okay, let's squeeze in one more. Okay, I'm going to look at this one. It's very colorful, and I'm curious to see what it's all about. So, Mohammed, NCAA 2023 Women Basketball Players Heights by States. Title isn't ideal, could be probably a little bit smoothed out. It sounds very statistical, and that doesn't necessarily ignite the fire in me to look at this. Maybe you can tell more of a story, or ask a question, or point out one interesting fact. Shortest players come mostly from Connecticut and Pennsylvania. Tallest players come from Oregon. Do they come from there or do they play there? There's a difference. So double check that. Also, why is what I'm wondering. And I cannot necessarily. Oh, okay. So this is the height by states. And see, I think with people being so mobile these days and moving around, somebody might have been born in California, grew up in Pennsylvania, ended up playing in college in Montana. So where do they fit? In the state that they're playing, in the state that they're from? I don't know if that really tells us much. It could also be that certain universities attract like have maybe more of a reputation in basketball, so it's maybe harder to get into those programs because there's more competition to get in there, because people say, well, I could actually play in the WNBA if I make it through that program. So you might have to be taller as a player on average to get into the teams, which then means, okay, this popular university for basketball, basically requires just a different type of player to get in because it's more competitive. I'm not really getting much from this viz. I'm getting a lot of colorful dots by inches. It makes it a lot of work for me to find out any information. I mean, the only information I get straight away is shortest players come from Connecticut and Pennsylvania, tallest from Oregon. And as a data person, I don't believe that. It might be in this data set, but I don't know if it's correct, because like I said in the beginning, do they come from there? Do they play there? Were they born there? What does it say about those states? And is there something we can say about those states? I think with, diversity and, like I said, mobility these days, I don't think we could make those kind of conclusions, especially not based on a single data set. But also, how am I meant to take anything out of this viz without hovering over every single dot? Plus, because we have, I'm assuming, 50 states in here, for every height, I need to flick through 50 squares. And am I really interested in, like, basically what it tells me is, so if I highlight this entire row, 51 items. Okay, so basically some states, for some heights, every state has a player in that category. For some heights, like 58 inches, there's only 2 players who happen to be in that category. Okay, like I don't think this is a valid way to really approach. Well, it might be valid, but I don't think it's very meaningful, and it puts far too much work on the audience to actually take information away from it, rather than giving me something that I can at least, that enlightens me. So yeah. With that, I'm going to finish up here, and thanks everyone for tuning in. I hope this was helpful, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day and the rest of your week. And I will be back next week. So I will speak to you then.